Hey guys, this is Kris Jones, your host of Beyond Local. This is episode 6, and we are going to be exploring content marketing and whether or not it's a viable lead generation tactic. I am actually extraordinarily excited and really privileged to have today's guest with us. It's Michael Ruth. He's the head of content marketing at LSEO.com. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me, Kris.
Absolutely. We've been chatting for several months. And I've been alluding to the fact that I really wanted to bring you on this podcast because, you're one of the best, if not the best writers I've ever worked with. And I've worked with a lot of good writers over the years. And, I think that what you brought to LSEO, was really exceptional in terms of the experience that you had leading up to here. So you've been with LSEO for about 1 year or so?
Yeah.
Let's chat a little bit more about your background, because I remember the interview. I sat in on that, and one of the things that really stuck out to me was that you have extensive experience as a professional writer, a professional technical writer. So share with us a little bit more about that backstory.
Yeah, so after college, I worked for 5 years for a publishing company, and there I wrote textbooks, I wrote encyclopedia entries. And what I liked about that is that just by the nature of the job, it forces you to research, to be good at research, and then to write, well because your clients are expecting high quality, factual accuracy. And so that experience in writing and research is something that I was able to bring, here to LSEO for digital marketing, because in SEO content writing, it's all about the research and the writing and getting everything right and doing it well.
Yeah, I mean, becoming a professional writer, one of the most common things we hear from prospective clients when we tell them how important content marketing is they immediately say, I'm not a writer. I don't know a writer like Michael Ruth. Now, the good news for us is that, we have a solution at LSEO to help them out. But we also want to help them think about, what makes a good writer. I mean, I'd love to hear from you. Is this a skill that is you're born with, like singing, or is it something that you could acquire?
I think that more than anything, it's about putting in the time and practicing it and not being afraid to fail and to make mistakes and, to hear about those mistakes. It's the only way you'll learn. And I learned early on that you can't take criticism personally, because with writing, there are so many areas to improve, so many things to think about. I don't think criticism for writing is personal.
Sure.
You have to learn from it.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, as a writer myself, I've written a couple of books and have been published a lot. I don't think it wasn't originally natural for me. And candidly, I would have never claimed to be a good writer. And I think I'm a pretty good writer now. And for those that are watching, at least in my opinion, and I'd like to hear from you if you agree, that for me, it was about learning how to write, like how important format is. And so for instance, when you write a piece, it's important to have a really strong introduction. You have the body of the article or the publication. Then you have a really good conclusion that could bring it home. And so that for me was like, oh, okay, I could do that. I could write a strong introduction, and, I'm a fairly sort of meticulous person. So I would be really careful in all the details. And then I would write the body, and then I'd write the conclusion. And then what I learned later, particularly once I started publishing professionally, was that you have a team of other eyeballs that come in, editors and others that could really even polish up your work. For you, is it again though, is it a learned skill, or is it something that, that you're born with, or a combination of the two?
I don't like to say that it's something you're born with, because I think it's unfair to, maybe people who want to be writers but don't feel like they're good enough. I think it does take practice. And I think to your point about sort of structuring writing in a logical, format, to go from the introduction to the body to the ending. Each sentence flows from the previous sentence. It should all make sense. So it's if you break writing down into a sort of a logical format like that, I think it becomes easier.
Yeah, and let's peel back the onion on this. I mean, at the end of the day, I try to share in this podcast. We like to cover topics that are important to any digital marketer, but I'd rather be known as the podcast that kind of peels back the onion and really thinks through how to make these things work for the person who's doing them. So let's start first with, what is the purpose of content marketing? Folks should know that this is one of Google's primary ranking factors, but what is the purpose of it?
The purpose of content writing is to educate, real people who use the internet. They go online, they need to know something, they want to buy something, they want to go somewhere, maybe get directions. Content marketing educates them. It explains to them, what this business does, how that business is different from other businesses, why someone should bring their business to this organization. And so it helps them to learn. And in so doing, if the content is good enough, search engines like Google will pick it up and show it to users. And so the purpose of content marketing is twofold, really, for people and for search engines. But in all cases, you should think of the user first.
Okay. Yeah, that's something I've heard you say a lot. So I guess to summarize, in terms of the purpose of it, you need to put it out there in order to get your business recognized. It needs to be natural and organic so that the user benefits from it. But we also have to take into consideration when we're writing, SEO best practices. Is that fair?
It's fair, because without taking into account those practices, people probably won't find your content.
That's well said. So I love the topic of content marketing, because I think if we just free flow write and we don't take into consideration the SEO best practices, we may miss the mark. We may wonder why we're spending so much time writing content and it's not actually generating increased organic traffic, increased, target keyword rankings. And so one of those areas that helps from an SEO best practice is the idea of selecting topics, right? We want to know what people are looking for. So why is that important? Or how do you think about, how does LSEO approach selecting topics?
Well, so SEO content writing is, first of all, it's not about just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. So when we write content, it's always based on real hard data that shows us what people want to know. And so when we write our content, we aim to answer those questions, because then when people search for them, they will ideally find the content that we write. And so if you are, just sitting around thinking of topics out of the air, probably that's not going to work out for you.
Yeah. So you use tools.
We use tools, tools that, for instance, the topic research tool in SEMrush. So if you search for a keyword phrase or a keyword, you put it in that tool, and it will take a few moments, and it'll show you data in different formats. It'll show you headlines, it'll show you questions, it'll show you a mind map, and from that information, you draw your content topics. Mm-hmm. So then, if, for instance, our client is a law firm, and let's say they do criminal defense, I'll put criminal defense in the tool. It gives me topics that I'll want to write about, and then when I write about it, people will be searching for it, and ideally, those two things will meet up.
Super interesting. So are there any other ways that, you mentioned SEMrush, are there any other tools or any other methods that you use as a professional writer to come up with those topics?
Something I like to do that's very simple and it's free, it's called mining the SERPs. So you search
What is SERPs? What does that stand for?
So SERPs are search engine result pages.
Okay, just the basic results that come out when you type a keyword into Google.
Type something into Google and you get 10 results on the first page. So if you do that for the topic that you're looking to write about, obviously you'll get the results that are currently ranking for that. Mm-hmm. So if you investigate those, you'll see, obviously what Google chooses to show in positions 1, 2, 3, and so on. If you look at those results, you'll see what they're doing well. You'll see whether they're long form, whether they're shorter, whether they have infographics, different kinds of things, how they present the information. And so your goal is to do it better so that you can ideally try to outrank those results.
Sure. Yeah, there's a ton there. That's why you have to come on in future episodes, because we could talk just generally about how you use those search engine results, to come up with things like, what keyword, or I'm sorry, what content length should we go with? 800 words, 1200, or is it more long form? What type of synonyms or other type of keywords do we need to insert into the content in order to really communicate to Google that this is an authoritative piece, so we could revisit that later. But in terms of choosing topics, really great advice. Boy, I remember, I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I remember there's this company called Demand Media. Demand Media was they still might be publicly traded, but became a publicly traded company by becoming literally a content machine. They were producing huge, huge volumes of content across dozens, if not hundreds of websites, and they created a multi-billion-dollar business. Then all of a sudden, Google came along with what they call Panda, which really takes a look at whether or not your content is too thin or whether or not it's high quality, etc. And that was multiple years ago. And ever since, the idea of high quality content is one of the most popular topics that is written about. From your point of view, what represents high quality content? How do we know if what we're publishing is high quality?
So high quality content is going to be any content that comprehensively answers user questions with detail, with all the information that they could possibly want to know, so that they don't come away from the content with any further questions. Sometimes there are discussions about word count in content marketing. I've read different viewpoints on that. Some people like to focus on like whether content is long form or shorter. Some people say it's more important to be comprehensive and detailed. I think the right answer is more of a middle ground. So if content is comprehensive, if it's detailed, if it answers questions, it could be that necessitates that it be long form content, more than 2,000 words or so. Sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you might be grasping for words if you try to make it long. So I think when we talk about high quality content, we mean very detailed, we mean factually accurate, and of course we mean making the use of the best SEO practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that for me, it's about how the content is interlinked within your website. So if it's short form and it's linked to other similar pieces of content, I think that you're communicating a sort of long form or a sort of subject matter expertise signal to Google. So to your point, I do think that there's a number of things that come in. I'm certain, the sister, if you will, to effective content marketing is link building. And so as it relates to how you write content, when you write content, are you thinking that it's your hope that you could actually acquire natural organic links pointing back into that? And if so, do you have any tips on how to do that?
Yeah, that's the idea. And I think the best tip to keep in mind is that probably no one will want to link to your content if it isn't those things I mentioned, if it isn't comprehensive, if it doesn't, if it's not relevant to the industry, to the business, if it doesn't, serve a purpose. People will want to link, to good content that sort of takes users further, further down the tunnel, sort of to give them more information, help them along in their search journeys.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned earlier in the podcast, you guys know that a lot of the content that we talk about here, we've already published on the LSEO blog. So we'll include it in the description of today's podcast. But Michael wrote a seminal piece, I think, on content marketing as a viable lead generation tactic earlier this year. So folks, you guys could see that and read his long form, much more detailed perspective on this topic. And of course, you could link to it if you'd like, because Michael wrote it with the intention of hopefully being enough value for you to link to it. And by the way, just as a quick example, we'll take today's video and we will include it on Michael's post. And the reason we want to do that is because we want this to be as valuable and as authoritative as possible. So it's something to keep in mind. So let's finish off the podcast by really, hitting at the most important aspect of this. The reason why you would want to write content that people see as valuable, that people will link to, that will generate high keyword rankings and significant search traffic, organic search traffic, is because you want to generate more leads. You want to generate more sales to your business. So is content marketing a viable lead generation tactic? Would you argue that it's the almighty, or would you suggest that it's just part of a large toolbox of tactics? Or would you say that content marketing is a primary, is a central, is a essential, no exception, how important it is for lead acquisition?
Yeah, well, it's certainly one of several, tools you can use. I think, of course, I don't have to tell you that content is king is sort of a maxim in digital marketing. It is, I would say, extremely important, because imagine if you got to a website that had no content, had no written content, you wouldn't know what they're about, you wouldn't know what to do. So if a user arrives on a site and they're looking to do business with the business, then content is going to explain to them why they should, or else they won't know to trust that business. They won't know what the business stands for. They won't know what to expect if they were to, engage with that business. And so content marketing really, it takes users down the sales funnel in a way. So they're going to trust your website and your business if your content is authoritative, if it's relevant to what they need to know. And by trusting you, they are much more likely to do business with you. I think that's kind of, that's one of the main things. And
no, I agree. And at the end of the day, I think it's easy to conclude that there's a strong correlation between the effectiveness of your content marketing strategy and your overall SEO strategy, such that if you remove the content marketing strategy, where you put together an effort to produce really good content consistently over time, if you remove that, you are basically spinning your tires in terms of trying to effectively execute SEO. So really appreciate all of your insights, all of your expertise. Look forward to bringing you back. And for those of you that watched, really appreciate you as well, and look forward to seeing you in episode 7.